So I want you to take a second and really try to picture the exact face of your absolute favorite book character.
Oh, that's a good exercise, yeah.
Right. Really focus on them for a moment. You know the exact shade of their eyes. You know the way their hair falls across their forehead when they lean over a desk.
Or just the specific set of their jaw when they get angry.
Exactly. If you're a big reader, you've spent hours, maybe hundreds of hours, walking alongside this person in your own imagination.
Yeah, you know what they look like.
You really do. It's as clear to you as the face of a close friend or a family member. But then inevitably, a movie or TV adaptation is announced.
And that's when the trouble starts.
Right. The studio releases the cast, and suddenly the actor they've chosen to play your favorite character looks absolutely nothing like the person you've been picturing in your head for all.
It's jarring.
It is. That highly specific, deeply intimate mental image you've cultivated, it's just completely shattered.
Yeah.
So what actually happens in your brain in that moment? Because for some people, it's just a minor adjustment. They shrug, they buy the movie ticket.
Sure.
But for others, it feels like a genuine, profound betrayal.
It really does. It's a deeply jarring cognitive experience for a lot of readers. We form incredibly strong, almost, I guess you'd call them proprietary attachments to the worlds we build inside our own minds.
We feel like we own them.
Exactly. When you read a book, you are essentially functioning as the casting director, the set designer, and, the cinematographer of your own internal movie.
That's a great way to put it.
And when an external piece of media comes along and attempts to overwrite that internal world, the friction can be intense.
Yeah.
We fundamentally like our visual expectations to be met. It provides a sense of continuity. It feels comfortable. It just feels right.
And when it doesn't match?
When it doesn't match, the brain literally registers it as an error.
And that feeling of friction, that sensation of having your internal visual expect completely upended by an external force, that is exactly where we are starting our conversation.
Yeah, it's a fascinating starting point.
It really is. So we're looking at a very specific, very vocal reaction to a casting. We're doing a deep dive into a YouTube video created by a commentator who goes by the name Metatron.
Right.
The video is titled HBO's Harry Potter Race Swap Senny P, and in it, he's reacting to rumors and early announcements circulating on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter.
Regarding the new TV show.
Right, the upcoming HBO Harry Potter series. Specifically, he's reacting to the rumor that the network is casting a black actor to play the incredibly iconic brooding potions master, Professor Severus Snape.
Now, before we really get into the weeds of this specific video, we should probably lay out our ground rules for you listeners.
Yeah, absolutely necessary.
Because this video touches on some incredibly heated culture war topics. We're talking race, gender ideology, the mechanics of cancel culture.
It's a minefield.
It is. So we are acting strictly as observers today. We aren't taking a side, we aren't endorsing his views, and we certainly aren't here to validate the opposing side of the political spectrum either.
Right. Strictly neutral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are treating this video like an artifact. We want to look under the hood of his argument to see how modern fandoms actually operate, how casting choices are debated, and what this incredibly fractured discourse tells us about the current state of media consumption.
Yeah, think of us as anthropologists examining a digital battlefield.
Right.
We just want to figure out why the battle lines are drawn exactly where they are.
That's the myth.
So let's jump straight in. Metatron does not mince words. He addresses the casting rumor, and his reaction is
extremely blunt.
He describes the casting of a black actor as Snape as a terrible cast. He doesn't hedge his bets at all.
No, he doesn't sugarcoat it for the algorithm or anything.
He is fundamentally opposed to it.
Yeah.
And the core of his argument relies on what we can call the established lore argument.
Right. His primary thesis here is that Snape is an established character. And by established, he means that this character's physical appearance has been rigidly cemented in two distinct ways.
Through the books and the movies.
Exactly. First, by the original author's literal descriptions in the text of the book, and second, by the massive visual legacy of the existing film series.
The Alan Rickman of it all.
Yeah. To Metatron, Severus Snape is not a blank canvas waiting for a new modern interpretation. He is a fully realized architectural blueprint that needs to be followed to the letter.
And he anticipates the blowback to this immediately, which I think is really telling about the state of the internet right now.
Oh yeah, he knows it's coming.
He knows that rejecting a black actor for a historically white role is going to immediately draw active racism, so he preemptively attempts to counter this by deploying an analogy using a Marvel superhero.
Like Blade.
Yes, he brings up Blade, the iconic black vampire hunter. Metatron argues, and quite forcefully actually, that if a white actor were cast as Blade, it would be completely unacceptable.
He literally says that is not Blade.
Right. He's using this to try and prove that his objection isn't about the race itself, but about this unyielding principle of consistency.
And we really need to unpack this concept of fandom consistency, because it is the absolute bedrock of his entire worldview regarding media.
How so?
Well, for creators like Metatron, visual fidelity to the original source material isn't just a flexible artistic choice.
Yeah.
It's not a dial bait a director can just turn to fit a new vision or a modern sensibility.
It's more serious than that to him.
Much more. It's viewed as a rigid, almost sacred contract between the creator of the property and the fan base. Breaking that visual contract is seen, in his own words, as a disservice to the fans.
It's viewed as a literal breach of trust.
Exactly.
I was trying to figure out how to explain this feeling of betrayal, and it's more than just getting the wrong order at a restaurant. It's more like showing up to a baseball game.
Okay, baseball game.
Right. Your favorite team is playing, you've got your hot dog, sit down, and suddenly the umpire announces they're going to use a tennis ball today instead of a baseball.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now, playing with a tennis ball might actually be incredibly fun to watch. It might result in wild bounces in a really high-scoring game.
Yeah.
But it changes the fundamental physics of the sport you've invested your time and your identity into.
That's a great analogy.
Because you didn't show up for an interpretation of baseball, right? You showed up for the established rules of the game.
That captures the mechanical frustration perfectly. You expected the physics of the universe to operate in a specific way, and the sudden rule change invalidates your prior knowledge.
It makes you feel like you don't know the game anymore.
Right. However, and this is a big however, if we look critically at his blade analogy, we have to ask if this is actually a mathematically symmetrical comparison.
This is exactly where I wanted to push on his logic, is comparing a historically white British wizard to a historically black vampire hunter, a perfectly symmetrical one-to-one comparison.
Because on paper, purely as a logic puzzle, it sounds bulletproof.
Right. Don't change white to black. Don't change black to white. It sounds fair. But does that equation completely ignore the broader historical context of Hollywood representation?
That's the counterargument.
When people on the opposing side of this debate hear the blade analogy, they usually argue that for nearly a century of filmmaking, white was the default casting for almost every hero, villain, and protagonist in Western media.
Black characters like Blade were incredibly rare exceptions.
Exactly. They were explicitly created to carve out representation in a sea of white face. So the counter-argument is that changing Blade to white erases a marginalized milestone, whereas changing Snape to black just redistributes one piece of an overwhelmingly white pie.
What you're highlighting there is the clash between two completely different definitions of symmetry.
Right.
Metatron is arguing for a strict, literal visual symmetry, a one-to-one adherence to the character design as it was drawn or written, operating in a vacuum where external history just does not matter.
Like outside politics shouldn't affect the...
Exactly. Sure. But the counter-argument operates on historical symmetry. It argues that because the past was heavily skewed in one direction, modern casting can, or maybe even actively should, skew in the other direction to balance the broader cultural scale.
And I imagine Metatron isn't buying that.
Not at all. Metatron's argument completely and totally rejects that historical balancing act. For him, the lore is the lore, the text is the text, and external Hollywood history should not be allowed to dictate or alter the literal visual reality of the Harry Potter universe.
To him, the universe is a closed system.
A completely closed system.
And his insistence that it is a closed system leads us directly into the next major clash video. Because the natural response from his critics when faced with this demand for extreme visual fidelity is the argument of meritocracy.
The best actor.
Right. People will argue that visual accuracy shouldn't be the top priority at all, and that studios should simply cast the best actor for the job. Full stop.
Just whoever nails the audition.
Exactly. The person who delivers the most compelling, heartbreaking, or terrifying audition wins the role, regardless of whether their skin color matches the book. And Metatron completely rejects this concept.
He dismisses the best actor argument almost entirely. In the video, he states that for a lot of people pushing this angle, claiming they only care about acting skill is merely virtue signaling.
So he doesn't even think they mean it.
No, he views it as a completely performative stand. In his eyes, it's a way for people to show off how supposedly non-racist they are, to fish for praise and social credit online, rather than a genuine, held artistic philosophy about the craft of acting.
That's wild. He goes so far as to use these really hyperbolic fantasy examples to try and break the best actor logic.
Yeah, the dwarf and elf thing.
Right. He asks his audience, okay, if you truly only care about acting schools, would you accept a very tall person playing a fantasy dwarf just because they gave a Shakespearean-level audition?
Or a burly, green-skinned, bald man playing a beautiful, ethereal elf.
Just because he had the best acting chops in the room. He's really stress-testing their logic by pushing it into the realm of the absurd.
And what he's inadvertently doing there is highlighting a massive fundamental friction between theatrical interpretation and cinematic world building.
Oh, that's a distinction.
Yeah, if we look at theater, especially modern stage plays, we see theatrical interpretation all the time, and audiences barely blink. Think of Hamilton.
Oh, sure.
Or think of a stage production of Macbeth, where anyone can play any role, regardless of gender, race, or even age. We accept that a 20-year-old woman can play an 80-year-old king on stage because the stage is inherently an abstract space.
Right, you're looking at a wooden platform, so you're already using your imagination.
Exactly. The audience is explicitly asked to suspend their disbelief and focus on the emotional truth of the performance.
Right, but cinema is different.
Exactly. Cinematic world building, especially in highly detailed, high-budget fantasy franchises like Harry Potter or The Lord of the Rings, operates on a completely different psychological wave.
It's supposed to look real.
The camera demands a different kind of literal immersion. The audience isn't looking at an abstract stage. They're looking at a meticulously crafted alternative reality that is trying to convince them it actually exists.
So Metatron is basically arguing that this specific type of cinematic immersion requires the actor to literally embody the physical descriptions of the lore.
Yes, the visual has to match the text, or the illusion of the world breaks for him.
He also makes a very specific claim while discussing this. He argues that there's a constant race-swapping phenomenon happening across modern media, but he claims it only ever goes in one direction.
Meaning pre-existing white characters being replaced by non-white actors.
Exactly. He suggests this proves it isn't about finding the best actor organically, but rather that studios feel a corporate political mandate to do this intentionally.
Right. He feels they are checking boxes.
Yeah. He argues that if these studios truly want representation, they should put in the actual creative hard work to invent entirely new, original black character, rather than just overlaying a new race onto a pre-existing white character like a fresh paint.
It's a pervasive critique within these lore-heavy fandom debates.
Yeah.
The underlying sentiment is that modifying an existing character feels unearned or artificial to fans who highly value the established canon.
They want new characters, not reskinned old ones.
Creating a new character theoretically expands the universe organically without overwriting the past. But returning to his hyperbole for a moment, the tall dwarf and the green elf, there's a fascinating structural flaw in his own analogy if we hold it up to the light.
Let's pull on that thread because I was thinking the exact same thing when watching it. Let's look at those fantasies.
Okay.
A dwarf being short isn't just an aesthetic choice by the author. It is the literal biological definition of the fictional species within that universe.
Right, that's what makes them a dwarf.
And an elf being fair, lithe, and immortal is biologically baked fantasy.
So I have to push back on his logic here. A human being with darker skin is still entirely 100% human.
Yes.
A tall dwarf fundamentally ceases to be a dwarf by the literal definition of the fantasy world.
Yeah.
So does applying the same rigid species-level biological rules to human skin color in a fictional universe reveal a fundamentally flawed way of weighing reality versus fantasy?
It reveals a profound conflation of categories. He's taking fictional species taxonomy and treating it as equivalent to human racial variance.
It just doesn't map perfectly.
As you said, the analogy is structurally asymmetrical. However, from Metatron's perspective, this asymmetry just doesn't matter because he elevates the text to the level of absolute law.
So the book says pale.
The specific paleness of Snape's skin is treated with the exact same level of canonical weight, the same level of architectural importance as a dwarf's height.
To him, the author's description elevates human skin tone to the level of a biological imperative for that specific character's identity. If the book says pale, then pale is the biological rule of the character, no different than a dwarf being short.
And this disagreement, over what is a biological imperative of a character versus what is a flexible artistic interpretation, this endless battle between best actor and visual accuracy, it never stays polite, does it?
No, it really doesn't.
The internet doesn't really do polite disagreement anymore.
Right.
Which actually bleeds right into how he handles the pushback on social media platforms.
Yeah, that's a whole other layer.
Metatron spends a significant amount of time addressing how this debate actually plays out in the real world, or at least the digital world of X.
The discourse on social media is a major point of grievance for him, and it really serves as a microcosm for the broader culture war.
He seems really fed up.
He expresses deep, palpable frustration with the environment on X. He claims that any time someone presents what he considers to be intelligently argued reasons against the casting, or even if someone just expresses a mild personal preference for a white actor in the role, they are immediately gaslit.
Gaslit. Like, they're told they're crazy.
They're instantly labeled a racist by people he refers to as, quote, clowns.
He's very careful to draw a line in the sand regarding that word, though. Racist, I mean. He explicitly states in the video that he opposes real racism.
Yes, he makes a point of that.
He says, Racism is bad in all of its forms, regardless of whether it's directed at black people or white people. He is putting that firmly on the record.
But he feels the word is being misused.
Exactly. What he is fiercely rejecting is the weaponization of the term race. He feels the word is being entirely drained of its actual historical gravity and meaning, and is instead being used merely as a tactical nuke to shut down valid criticism, silence dissenting opinions, and basically win internet arguments by default.
If we examine the mechanics of how an internet culture war functions, this is textbook behavior on both sides. Both factions fundamentally view the other as acting in complete bad faith.
They don't believe the other side is genuine.
Exact. Metatron views the accusation of racism not as a genuine critique of his position, not as someone actually looking at his heart and finding prejudice, but as a deliberate manipulative tactic. He actually uses the phrase deletion of white characters out of hatred.
Wait, he actually thinks it's driven by hatred?
Yes, that phrase suggests he believes his ideological opponents are not driven by a noble desire for positive minority representation, but rather by a malicious anti-white sentiment.
That is a huge escalation.
It is. He views the casting choices as hostile acts of erasure and the resulting accusations of racism as gaslighting designed to cover up that hostility.
Because of all this toxicity, because the temperature is so high, he attempts to do something kind of interesting with his own platform.
The safe haven.
Right. He tries to establish the comment section of his YouTube video as a quote-unquote safe haven. He promises his viewers that his comment section will be free from emotional manipulation, free from shaming, and free from cultist behavior.
He wants a polite debate club.
He explicitly invites people who disagree with him to comment. He promises to respect polite disagreements as long as they are reasonably argued out.
But then there's the catch.
And it's a massive contradiction. He immediately follows that up by stating that if someone blanketly calls his critics racist, he will absolutely insult them. He literally promises to call them a woke clown.
It's the paradox of the internet safe haven. What's fascinating here is the sheer tension between his stated desire for a neutral, respectful forum and the reality of the language he arms himself with to defend it.
I just have to push back on his whole premise. How can anyone take this safe haven idea serious?
It's tough.
Metatron pleads for a civil, respectful space where people don't use name-calling or gaslight. Yet in the very same breath, he arms himself with highly charged, incredibly inflammatory terms like woke clown, radical left-wing cultist, and anti-white.
It's fighting fire with fire.
But you cannot build a demilitarized zone while simultaneously laying landmines everywhere. Does he not realize that by predefining the opposition's arguments as the work of cultists or clowns, he is establishing a rhetorical environment where true neutrality is essentially impossible?
I think it perfectly illustrates how deeply entrenched the combatants in these digital culture wars have become. They often cannot even perceive how their own defensive language perpetuates the exact hostility they are complaining about.
They're blind to their own rhetoric.
The safe haven he is offering is only safe for those who operate strictly within his specific linguistic and ideological framework. If you step outside it, if you use the vocabulary of the opposing side, like calling someone racist, you immediately trigger his woke clown defense mechanism.
It's like an automated turret.
And the algorithm of the internet actually heavily incentivizes. Platforms like X or YouTube thrive on this exact type of friction. Nuance doesn't generate clicks, but calling someone a woke clan or a racist generates massive engagement.
It gets the comments flowing.
So the platforms subtly encourage users to harden their linguistic armor.
So we have all this intense, swirling political rhetoric, the weaponization of language, the algorithms feeding the fire. But I want to pull us out of the broader culture war for a moment and ground this conversation back in the specifics of the actual character.
Back to Snape.
Yeah, because I was trying to figure out why this specific character's look gets under his skin so much. Why is Metatron so incredibly attached to a specific look for Severus Snape?
It's a very specific aesthetic.
What is driving this intense aesthetic loyalty that makes him want to fight this battle in the first place?
Well, later in his video, Metatron details exactly why Snape's specific look matters to him on a deeply personal aesthetic level. He's drawn to what he calls Snape's ghostly appearance.
Oh,
he specifically highlights the stark, dramatic visual contrast of very pale skin set against very dark hair and dark eyes. He argues that this specific visual contrast perfectly suits and enhances the dark mood and the complex, brooding psychology of the character.
And this is where his argument gets really interesting, because he uses this to prove that his objection isn't just about a broad, politically motivated racial category.
He says he'd reject white actors, too.
He does. He states that he would also completely reject a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white actor in the role. He would even reject fact, a ginger white actor pointing out, quite logically within the internal lore of the universe, that gingers are already heavily represented by the Weasley.
Right, he doesn't want another Weasley lookalike.
Exact. To Metatron, any deviation from that specific pale skin, dark hair contrast makes the actor an imposter. He references a post by an ex-account named Nadrotic showing the newly rumored black actor, using it to reinforce his stance that whether the actor is Asian, Middle Eastern, blonde, or black don't have that exact ghostly contrast. They simply aren't.
This is a vital piece of the puzzle because it humanizes the outrage. It shows us that for this specific creator, the anger isn't solely a reactionary political stance about race in modern Hollywood.
It's deeper than that for him.
It's deeply rooted in a highly specific, granular aesthetic preference. We are looking at how deeply audiences internalize visual design as part of narrative storytelling.
It's like the visual is the character.
For Metatron, that pale dark contrast isn't just a physical descriptor. It is a visual metaphor for the character's internal conflict. It creates an emotional resonance for him that is inextricably linked to the character's personality and narrative function within the story.
So changing the look changes the actual meaning of the character.
To him, yes. To change the contrast is to change the meaning.
And to prove how incredibly deeply internalized this is, he shares this highly specific, wildly cultural touchstone that absolutely blew my mind.
Oh, the Italian pop singer.
Yes. He says that if you are Italian, your mental image of Severus Snape is inextricably linked to a real-world Italian pop singer named Renato Zero.
The Renato Zero effect. This is perhaps the most fascinating sociological detail in the entire video.
It is brilliant. Think about what is happening here. You have this massive, globally dominant British fantasy franchise written by a British author steeped in British mythology and schooling.
Very British.
But it is being filtered through a hyper-local, deeply personal cultural lens. For an Italian fan growing up reading these books, a flamboyant Italian pop singer from the 1970s and 80s becomes the definitive, cementing mental image for a brooding British wizard.
It perfectly demonstrates that we do not consume media in a vacuum.
We map these fictional universes onto the real-world cultural references we already possess.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates the deeply subjective nature of fandom, even when fans are arguing for objective accuracy.
That is such a good point. They think they're being objective.
Right. The author wrote specific words on a page. Later, the film director cast Alan Rickman, who brought his own physical reality to the role. But the Italian fans synthesized the text, the films, and Renato Zero all together.
It's a mashup.
The resulting mental image is a unique, culturally specific hybrid. The fan believes their image is the quote-unquote objective truth of the text, but it is actually highly...
So when the studio changes it...
When the studio comes along and says, here is a completely different looking person to play Snape, they're not just changing the author's original vision. They are violently overriding that fan's deeply personal, culturally specific hybrid reality.
That is why the reaction is so emotional. It feels like a literal theft of personal memory.
That's exactly it.
But as we know all too well in the modern era, this debate does not stay confined to the aesthetics of hair and skin contrast or Italian pop singers.
No, it rarely stays that simple.
If this were purely a debate about whether Snape should look more ghostly or more like Renato Zero, the temperature in the room wouldn't be nearly so high. It would just be a polite disagreement on a messenger.
But he brings up the author.
He does. Metatron directly ties this casting choice and the intense reaction back to the original author. And the moment he brings up J.K. Rowling, he opens a massive, highly volatile political Pandora's box.
We are now entering the most heavily polarized aspect of his commentary. Metatron shifts his focus entirely away from the casting and toward J.K. Rowling herself.
Right.
And specifically, her incredibly fraught standing with what he terms radical left-wing and LGBTQ activist space. He notes that she is deeply hated by these groups.
And he's very specific about why she is hated. He states it's because she has very strong ideas when it comes to what a woman is.
Referring to her highly publicized, deeply controversial, and ongoing stances on transgender ideology and LGBTQ activism.
It's a huge flashpoint.
It is. Metatron then details what he views as aggressive, coordinated cancel culture tactics utilized by these activists against the author.
Your kind of tactics.
Well, he claims that these groups deliberately and maliciously lie about J.K. Rowling to justify their hostile behavior toward her and her fans. The specific example he cites in his video is a claim that activists falsely stated Rowling told people to, and he spells this out carefully in the video, to avoid triggering YouTube's moderation algorithm, KIL, every trans.
Wait, he says they claim she literally said that?
Yes. He asserts this is a complete fabrication, a piece of manufactured outrage used to justify extreme react, which he says includes the literal physical burning of Harry Potter books by protesters.
Wow. He also describes this intense, almost suffocating pressure that is put on, quote-unquote, allies within the fandom.
Yes, the pressure on the fans themselves.
Right. According to Metatron's narrative of events, if a fan who considers themselves a progressive ally decides they just want to buy a Harry Potter video game or purchase a new book, the activist spaces use immediate shame to try and control.
They demand compliance.
They demand 100% ideological. If you buy the Wizard game, you're immediately branded a bigot. Your allyship is revoked, and you're exiled from the digital.
What we are observing here is a fascinating analysis of how intellectual books, movies, video games have become literal proxy battlegrounds for real-world political ideologies.
They're not just games anymore.
No, they're not. He is describing a very real internet phenomenon known as purity testing within online communities.
Let's dig into that mechanism. Why does the internet incentivize purity testing so much? From boycotting a company for bad labor practices to boycotting art because of the creator's tweets, the shift is wild.
It's a huge shift in consumer act.
In the past, you might see a massive boycott of a company because they were dumping chemicals into a river or utilizing terrible sweatshop labor. You boycotted the product because the literal creation of the product caused direct, tangible harm.
Right, there was a physical consequence.
But there has been a massive shift in how in this modern context, the boycott isn't necessarily about the product itself. The Harry Potter video game doesn't contain anti-trans mechanics or hate.
It's just a game about magic.
Exactly. The boycott is based entirely on the personal, off-screen, ideological statements of the creator.
That is the core of purity test. In the digital age, we lack physical community mark. We don't have local town halls or physical gathering spaces to prove we belong to a tribe.
We just have our avatars and our timelines.
Therefore, our consumption habits become our uniform. The media you consume, and specifically the products you publicly purchase, serve as a public declaration of your moral and political alignment.
So buying the game is like wearing the wrong uniform.
Exactly. Purity testing functions as a social survival mechanism in digital space. To prove you are part of the good in-group, you must loudly and publicly reject the bad out.
And what's even more fascinating is the enforcement mechanism. It isn't a centralized union holding a picket line outside a factory.
No, it's peer-to-peer.
It's peer-to-peer surveillance. It's fans policing other fans within their own digital. It's weaponized peer pressure, driven by the fear of being exiled from your social circle for buying the wrong video.
It's highly effective, too.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most intense part of our conversation. When a creator like Metatron looks at this landscape, when he sees this immense pressure, the purity testing, the shaming happening to everyday fans who just want to play a game, how does he react?
That's the big question.
Does he just throw his hands up, walk away from the toxicity, and abandon the Harry Potter franchise altogether to find a quieter hobby?
You'd think that would be the healthy choice.
The answer, incredibly, is the exact opposite. He doubles down.
Yes. In direct response to what he labels as cultist controlling behavior and the coordinated attempts to shame fans into boycotting J.K. Rowling, Metatron makes a very specific, financially driven vow to his audience.
He promises them that he will purposefully go out of his way to buy absolutely anything J.K. Rowling pushes forward.
But not just anything.
Right. He specifically states he is looking for items that have an invested royalty. He wants to ensure that his purchase directly benefits her financially. He is literally turning his wallet into a weapon.
And he lays out the math of his retaliation very clearly. He states that if the activist campaigns successfully shame even one single person into apologizing and deciding not to buy a Harry Potter product, he will personally buy that product himself to compensate for the lost sale.
He's going to single-handedly make up.
He is attempting to financially neutralize the activist boycott single-handedly, using his own disposable income.
Let's really unpack the psychology and economics of this, because this is a wild place to end up. What we are talking about here is the economics of smite, or reactionary consumerism.
Bite.
Think about how bizarre this is. The actual inherent value of the product completely evaporates. It doesn't matter if the new book is poorly written.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if the new video game is full of bugs, has terrible graphics, and is completely unfun to play.
The quality doesn't factor in at all.
The quality of the art is entirely irrelevant to the transaction. The value is entirely derived from the act of purchase. The credit card swipe itself, it becomes a tangible tool to counteract a perceived.
It is the ultimate evolution of the proxy battleground we discussed earlier. The transaction becomes the protest.
It's fascinating.
By spite buying, the consumer is attempting to exert control over a cultural narrative that they feel is spinning out of their grasp. Metatron feels he cannot stop the activists from shaming people online. He cannot control the discourse on X.
But he can control his money.
But he can ensure the target of that shaming remains financially invincible. It's a way of voting with your wallet, but the vote is cast purely out of defiance rather than actual desire for the product.
It's not about loving the game.
No, the purchase is a middle finger to the activist, commodifying amplified and monetized by the corporations selling the game.
I have to say, looking at all of this, taking a step back from the arguments, I just feel this immense sense of exhaustion on behalf of the average consumer.
It is incredibly exhausting.
Think about it. If buying a Wizard video game is an intense act of political defiance, and boycotting that same video game is an intense act of ideological loyalty, where does the actual enjoyment of the art fit in?
It doesn't.
Have we reached a point where the fandom has completely eaten the fantasy? It feels like we are living in a cultural moment where you cannot just be a fan anymore. You're drafted into being a soldier for a cause, even when you're just standing in line at the bookstore or clicking add to cart on a website.
That is the tragic casualty of these perpetual culture wars. The video we analyze today is a perfect artifact of this exact era.
It really encapsulates the whole thing.
What begins as a relatively straightforward aesthetic disagreement about how a fictional potions master should look rapidly escalates. It escapes containment.
It goes from hair color to book burning in like 10 minutes.
It is immediately pulled into the gravitational pull of larger, intractable societal debate about historical representation, biological taxonomy versus human race, gender ideology, cancel culture, and the ethics of spite-driven consumerism.
It's a heavy load for a pop culture franchise.
The simple, childlike fun of escaping into a fantasy world is entirely eclipsed by the duty of engaging in ideological warfare. The art is lost to the war.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground. We started this deep dive with a single unconfirmed casting rumor about Professor Snape.
Just a rumor on Twitter.
And from that one tiny spark, we ended up dissecting the rigid psychological mechanics of visual fidelity, the intense weaponization of language and algorithms on social media platforms, the peer-to-peer surveillance of modern fandoms, purity testing, and finally, the bizarre, exhausting phenomenon of weaponizing our own wallet through spite buy.
And we must reiterate why we took this journey today.
Yes, our disclaimer.
Our goal was never to agree with Metatron's assertions, nor was it to dismantle them in favor of his critic. Our objective was to use his video as a highly detailed map of the modern internet.
A map of how we talk to each other now.
By analyzing his arguments impartially, by looking at the mechanisms of why he argues the way he does, we are better able to navigate the incredibly complex, often completely contradictory and highly volatile landscape of modern pop culture discourse.
We just understand the machinery better now.
Exactly. We understand the machinery behind the outrage on both sides much more clearly.
Right. Because it isn't just about a TV show casting, is it? It's about how we communicate our deeply held values and our fears in the digital age.
It always comes back to that.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something I want you, the listener, to really mull over, go about. In a world where every single casting announcement, every minor character design tweak, and every $60 purchase is immediately drafted into a global, never-ending culture war, are we actively losing the fundamental human ability to simply be entertained?
That's a scary thought.
If you have to consult a political compass, check your social media echo chamber to ensure your friends and brace for an ideological battle before you decide to sit down and enjoy a fantasy TV show who actually owns your imagination.
Is it you?
Is it you, or is it the algorithm feeding the outrage? Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep questioning the narrative.